anything particular you want to say about the
I
penalty?
reject this verdict. You're saying I'm guilty of this offence, yes. I reject this verdict. I'm glued on here, and I'm live streaming this so that you know that I am protesting at the complicity of this court.
4-6 guy.
It's not me that's guilty, it's the government that's guilty. They are guilty of huge dereliction of duty, and all of us, all of you who have children, I don't have children, I do it for your children and your grandchildren, and it's no good pretending not to listen, because this is really important. My name is Sue Parfitt. I'm an Anglican priest in the Diocese of Bristol, and I'm a member of Christian Climate Action and engaged in acts of civil disobedience to draw attention to the fact that the government is highly negligent in its lack of urgent response to the climate catastrophe.
So we're glued onto the furniture. We had a lovely bright XR pink banner saying that this court is complicit in climate crime, but that was removed. The magistrates' courts in general are not allowing the plea of necessity for our peaceful resistance to climate breakdown, and the threat to humanity and God's creation is immediate and is existential. I'm Ruth Jarman, and I've just been arrested and put in a police cell again for contempt of court, because we think that the court system is complicit in climate crime. Matthew 5, when Jesus says, if somebody wants to sue you for your cloak, then hand over your tunic as well. And that is asking us to disobey in the dock, basically. So there is that Christian precedent, and you can't get better Christian precedent than Jesus himself. And so there is that. And also the response from people. People were inspired to do more. People were inspired, and people got it, that the court system is complicit in climate crime. So yes, if you just want to do everything that helps, then you want to just lay yourself open and say, right, if this helps, then it must be the right thing to do.
Of all the movements, of big social movements in the past, they've all involved at some point people being prepared to put their bodies on the line, get arrested and go to prison. One might say, well, what's the point of it? And at the time, it's not always clear to see what the point of it is, but all we can tell is that history suggests that there is an important moment of crossing the line into civil disobedience. And I think I'd put it as being to do for a Christian and as a priest to say, it's not about disobedience, it's about obedience to God. It's about being quite clear. And I've really never been quite as clear as this in my life about what God is intending and wanting, but quite clear that God does need people to put their bodies on the line, to lay down their lives for others. And that may sound a bit over dramatic, but at this time of year, we're thinking about that, and to follow Jesus in the steps of his civil disobedience and the early church. And I think that's what is crucial to me, that the church today in all denominations is unrecognizable, really, from the early church, for which it was a revolving door of meeting, praying, going out and preaching, getting arrested, going to prison, coming out, meeting, praying, etc., etc. And I think somehow in this most critical time, the most critical time that the planet and humanity has ever faced, we surely are called to do that now.
We've been here 10,000 years by John.
name's Helen Burnett. I'm a priest in the Church of England. I'm the vicar of St Peter and St Paul's in Chaldon and the Diocese of Southwark, and I've recently been on trial. I was prepared to break the law because I think there is a higher law than the law of the land when it comes to honouring the sanctity of all life. I was overwhelmed by a sense that the only thing left in my capacity as a human being was to stay and to pray in the place that would inconvenience and cause a disruption. And that was part of my faith calling, to be a person of faith in that space at that time. In an action put together by Extinction Rebellion, I may be the only person of faith in a particular group. And I think that's very powerful, that we're not all together doing these things in a little kind of cozy Christian group. We're doing this amongst the community of people who similarly feel moved to act. And one of the things that's very powerful about both Extinction Rebellion and Christian Climate Action is the use of ritual and the use of the spiritual side of everybody's lives, not just Christians, that there's an interfaith group and people of no faith who still feel that there is something of the sacred in this crisis, that it's a spiritual crisis as well as a physical one. And I suppose what we did was not proportionate. It was not enough. How could we ever do enough given the actual suffering of actual people as we stood in court? And that was one of our main points, was that as we stood in court and as we had sat on the pavement in London, people are dying because of the climate emergency.
I'm Mark Coleman. I'm a priest in the Diocese of Manchester, Church of England. I was arrested in October 2019. In our case, for obstructing the highway, Helen gave a beautiful and powerful speech about the moral and Christian imperatives, and I took on the role of acting as our legal defence, or well, it seemed to work out most that way. And I'd studied law at university and then turned away from the law feeling a Christian vocation. And so it was quite fun to re-adopt the law, and we'd had a super help from a barrister who gave us free help. But it struck me with all that stuff, the legal stuff, that it was all empty. It revealed how it just wasn't functioning in a good way. The state had no clothes on. It made a lot of its law, but the law wasn't really about justice. The law was failing, as others have said. And there was a point where I think I said to the magistrates, the law clearly isn't working because we have to prove that we're being reasonable and we're acting proportionately for the defences to function. And I said, all we did was sit on the road with a climate emergency. You could say that we were acting in a rather pathetic and timid manner, just sitting on the road. We should be a lot angrier and doing a lot more action. Wouldn't you say, magistrates? I thought it was a very powerful point, but they didn't seem to take it on board, and we were convicted.
I know that this is not asking a very great sacrifice of me, actually. And what it does is, the feelings, therefore, are, I do have fear. I do have fear the day before the action, for sure. But once it's underway, it's a question of handing over. And I think there's something very spiritual and biblical about the fact that we hand ourselves over to others to do what they will with us. It's like the handing over to God, really, because if we believe that God is deeply in this, then that is what we're doing. Part of the feelings also are feelings of joy, I have to say. I mean, the first time I was arrested was on Maundy Thursday, and all I could think was, in 2019, this is the night that Jesus was arrested and handed himself over. And also it's the joy of having opportunities, something St. Paul talks about, doesn't he, in first chapter of Philippians. All this, he says, about being in prison, all this is going good for the church. Many brothers and sisters in the prison have come to realize why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I'm sure we've all had the experience of talking with officials and prison guards and police and court officials about why we're doing it. And we're doing it as we're followers of Christ. That's why we're doing it.
I'm Ben Hughes. I'm a member of Christian Climate Action, and I was recently in prison for contempt of court.
We've got another film.
Can you
turn it off?
I'm not turning it off because I'm in a total agreement. It's absolute madness.
We cannot carry on like this. We must listen to the cry to stop this madness. And we should be listening to what the protesters are saying rather than stamping down on the voice. It's just so upsetting, so upsetting.
I just want to
seeing all these protests just being dismissed. The courts are just dismissing defence of necessity and finding everyone guilty. And so they are complicit. We should,
at the moment, you're going to be arrested for contempt of court.
yes,
So they had to wait for the police unbonding team to unstick us. Then we were taken to the dock and prosecuted for the contempt of court and sent to prison for 14 days. So it was a very daunting experience, and you change into your prison clothes and that uncertainty of what was going to come next. Fortunately, I spent the time in a cell with Tim, so that actually worked out very well.
My name's Tim Hughes. I'm a priest in the Church of England. I was acquitted in my trial the previous week, but I went to support Ben with his trial, and so I went as a supporter, and while he was gluing on and live streaming, they didn't seem to be taking much notice of me, and I did the same. So we were live streaming each other. And again, we were taken to the dock and then finished up in Wandsworth prison. I was stimulated to do that because between the week of my trial and the week of Ben's trial, the government had announced that it was going to spend £10 billion on increasing nuclear warheads at a time when we should actually be spending massive amounts of money on trying to avert the climate crisis, rather than spending the petty cash on it, which the government seemed determined to do. I was animated and glued on because of the gap between the government rhetoric and government action. If somebody told me I was going to do that 10 years ago, I'd have been horrified, because I've been a law-abiding citizen all my life, but actually the laws are absurd that treat us in this way when we're trying to draw attention to the planet burning while the government fiddles.
I'm Barbara Wilson. I'm a lay Roman Catholic and a member of Christian Climate Action. I've been supporting Ben and Tim during their time in prison. I was a channel mostly for Ben to send on the emails, but also to talk to Ben when he was able to phone us and to pass his news back to his family, to his parish, and to others in Christian Climate Action. So there was a bit of a dialogue between us, and I think that I hope that helped them, and I think it helped people to carry on praying. There was this very, very strong network of prayer that was supporting them both.
As a result of that, we were able to receive emails which Gaynor and Barbara were passing to us, cutting and pasting, passing to us from parishioners and dear members of Christian Climate Action. I say dear members, I've only been only been a member for a matter of a few weeks, but actually it feels like a home. Family I've never met before, but I've discovered. So it was amazing to be able to receive those messages that were sort of poked up the door once or twice a day, and from people that I knew, people that I didn't, and it was amazingly uplifting. Actually, I found it quite overwhelming, the support. I had to go and have a sort of wash afterwards after reading them on one occasion, but it was so good to be part of a community, to be aware that we hadn't been forgotten, but actually that we were being supported and prayed for and upheld, and it was amazing.
So as we settle, perhaps we might just settle in our seats, still ourselves for a moment, think about our breath, and perhaps think about breathing in the presence of the Holy Spirit, asking her to be with us in our prayer time this morning.
Within our darkest hour, you kindle a flame that never died.
The acceptance of suffering in our pursuit of justice and the proclamation of the truth is essential to non-violence. One place to test our growth in unconditional love is in prison for our peacemaking activities. Prison is a place where our spiritual roots will be tested and blossom, where that accepted suffering for justice's sake can be lived to the fullest, where our non-violence can come full circle as we dwell in the peace of God among the poor. It is a place where the unconditional love in our hearts and the prayerful non-violence of our entire lives can bear fruit through our peaceful contemplation. Our silent presence can remind the world about the basic issues of justice and peace.
It did actually resonate very powerfully with the early church in the sense that we were in prison, and I felt that it was right that we should be there. I mean, I did the contempt knowing that was hoping in respect that was going to happen, because I felt that there was few other actions that I could take. I found the prison officers, they found it difficult to understand that I was on a fast while I was in prison. And they kept trying to force food on us. Couldn't understand why I'd be on a fast, but it was something that I felt that I wanted to do. Felt that it was an earth fast for me, fasting for the planet and helping me it was something of a prayer. And the reason that it was something of a prayer for me was because I actually find during this time of climate crisis, I find it very difficult to articulate words in prayer. And I felt that by the fast, it was the best prayer that I could make while I was in prison on behalf of for the planet. And in fact, I got response from a few atheists who were saying that they had been disillusioned by the stance of the church in years past with climate change and other issues. And that actually the action that Ben and I were taking had restored their sense that Christians were standing up and taking these issues seriously.
What on earth is the church saying when it says it cannot condone breaking the law, which is what the diocese said when Tim and Ben were imprisoned? And somehow I think CCA has to say to the church and the powers of the church, the hierarchy of the church, we've got to do better than that. It's total nonsense. The early church was breaking the law all the time up until Constantine. I mean, that was part of people apparently didn't get baptized until nearly they died because it was so terrifying to be a Christian.
In the name of God, Creator, Redeemer and Sustainer. Amen. We celebrate this Eucharist, friends, in solidarity with all of creation, in solidarity with all who have been imprisoned, in solidarity with all who have passed the night on the streets.
What we're about is being on the streets, the visible church, to wake up the church that is not on the streets but needs to be.
In many ways, Extinction Rebellion is like the church I always wanted to be part of, in that it has people gathering together around love, non-violence, inclusion, good principles of listening, that sort of thing. So many ingredients of church. So my Extinction Rebellion world is alongside my Christian climate action world, with activism and an open spirit, but with prayer and teaching and sharing of learning, has given me a renewed vision of church. And I just pray that the institutional church, the established churches of whatever denomination, just wake up a bit, because we seem rather irrelevant in our institutional form. I think just so out of step, and there's not much time left.
But I think that's part of what we need to do, actually, to challenge the bishops. The fact that the Latin American bishops and the South African bishops, of course, about apartheid. I mean, we need to say to the bishops, it must be very cozy and lovely and make you feel ever so good to be part of the House of Lords and go up and, do all that stuff. But this has absolutely nothing to do with the gospel. And, of course, the answer will be, oh, but he gives us opportunities and influence and all the rest of it. A bit like being a shareholder in Shell or something. But this is all nonsense, really. And we have to say I'm really very, very committed to this idea that we've got to nip this mantra in the bud before it gains credence, that we cannot condone breaking the law. We have to try to get over to bishops, I think, right now, the fact this has nothing to do with the gospel. We're not here to worship the law of any particular country. Of course, the law is there for our good, and it behoves us to be scrupulous law keepers when the law is good. But it has nothing to do with being obedient to God.
There is a sense that both in the Christian community and in the non-Christian community, there is an acknowledgement that there is a need for action beyond, which involves breaking the law. And one of the things that I have found is the huge acceptance by the non-Christian activists of what we represent. And I think I was quite worried that I would not get that I would be, what are you doing here in your dog collar? The huge acceptance and huge encouragement. I mean, the love and encouragement that Mark has experienced and describes as church is what I have felt in my Extinction Rebellion group. Very much that I'm valued for what I am as a Christian and for somebody visibly with a role within the church, alongside people who would not cross the threshold of a parish church, but who invite me to speak, to lead Faith at the Gate locally at an oil extraction plant, and are happy to pray and meditate with me, which is quite a new phenomenon.
Pope Francis has taken quite a strong lead in publishing an encyclical, Laudato Si, and that has been very inspirational for an awful lot of Catholics. Well, basically, he starts with several chapters about there being this major climate emergency and how we need to respond to it. And he talks about personal ecological conversions, so that each of us as an individual has to respond and do something, but each of us as an individual also should act politically and in whatever way is appropriate. He doesn't say we should break the law, but he does say we should seek to influence our governments and, the appropriate authorities so that appropriate action is taken. And it's pretty clear that when the Paris Climate Conference happened in 2015 and the encyclical was published a few months before, it was quite influential in helping move countries on to make the pledges that they made. And it has had quite a big influence in ordinary parishes up and down the country here and all over the world, but just not far enough, not fast enough.
The church's job is to be prophetic, isn't it? And what could be more important than telling the truth about the climate crisis? And that is what the church should be doing. And it is also what us as Christians, it is our job to tell the truth about the climate crisis. Nothing says as clearly and as simply that we are in an emergency as breaking the law of the land. It just does. That's what people ask. Even if they don't like it, they will ask in their mind, even if they don't ask you, why is she doing that? It must be serious. So I think it's a Christian's job to go beyond what is normal for the culture that we live in, and that often might involve breaking the law, and or might be seen as breaking the law, because actually we're not breaking the law because there's a higher law. We might be breaking some laws, but we are within a higher law. So yes, I guess and this year, COP, if it happens, G7, this is the year to do it. So let's get on with it.
I follow on from what Ruth is saying, that COP26 for me is what happens next. Whatever my Extinction Rebellion group do, I will be a part of. But I'm very excited about COP26 and about the pilgrimage that we will be walking from London to Glasgow. And that again is, absolutely grounded in Christian practice, to walk, to pray, to pilgrimage, and to be in that way also a witness, a visible witness.
And then coming back to Ben and Tim getting all those support letters, emails in prison, a lot of people have been inspired. And I think one of the things that we as CCA probably need to do is to energize that inspiration to get people to do things. I think that's one of the gifts that all of you that have been at the front of it can give to other people as well.
I can't stop, and this is the problem. Well, maybe it's a good thing, but no, I can't stop. I have to continue, and I feel, I guess, because of our duty to creation, we don't have a choice, do we?
I think, as Ben says, we have to keep on keeping on according to the way God is calling us. And so discernment and prayer must be absolutely continue and increasingly be at the heart of anything and everything we do. I remember reading somewhere, the more activist you are, the more time you need to spend in contemplative prayer each day.
This coming week, there's a whole lot of things to pray for, which will be in the prayer email, but I just thought I'd remind you. On Tuesday, Nadira is in court for obstruction of the highway. On Thursday, Martin Newell is in court. I can't remember which of his many actions he's in court for, but I will find out. And on Friday, Sue is in court. So there's plenty of stuff to pray for this coming week, please.